The phone pierced the darkness at 3 in the morning. Michael Grant woke instantly, decades of business crises, training his body to respond. He grabbed his phone, squinting at the bright screen. Unknown number. Hello, Mr. Grant. The voice was clinical professional. This is Dr. Reynolds from Boston Memorial Hospital. Your granddaughter Lucy has been admitted to our emergency department. Michael sat bolt upright, suddenly wide awake. Lucy? What happened? Is she all right? Sir, I think you should come immediately. There are concerning injuries. Michael was already moving and grabbing clothes from his closet. Where's my daughter? Where's Jessica? A pause stretched across the line. That's part of why we're calling you Mr. Grant. Your daughter brought Lucy in and then disappeared. Hospital security is reviewing footage, but we haven't located her. Lucy is asking for you. I'll be there in 20 minutes. Michael ended the call, his hands trembling slightly as he buttoned his shirt. Lucy, 6 years old, his only grandchild. The thought of her alone and hurt sent a wave of nausea through him. The night air was cold against his face as he strode to the elevator of his penthouse apartment. The private garage beneath the building held his collection of luxury vehicles, but tonight he chose the Audi, fastest and most practical. As the engine roared to life, his mind raced through possibilities, each worse than the last. Boston Memorial loomed ahead, its emergency entrance bathed in harsh fluorescent light. Michael parked haphazardly, tossing his keys to the valet without a second glance. His status as one of the city's wealthiest businessmen typically commanded attention, but tonight he was simply a worried grandfather, his usual composed demeanor fractured by fear. Lucy Grant, he told the emergency desk clerk, my granddaughter was brought in tonight. The woman nodded, recognition flashing in her eyes. Yes, Mr. Grant, Dr. Reynolds is expecting you. Room 3. Michael followed a nurse through swinging doors into the heart of the emergency department. The antiseptic smell brought back memories he'd spent years suppressing, sitting beside his wife Catherine's hospital bed as cancer slowly claimed her. 10 years ago, yet the scent alone made his chest tighten. Dr. Reynolds met him outside room 3, young serious clipboard in hand. Mr. Grant, I'm Dr. Emily Reynolds. Her handshake was firm. Before you see Lucy, we need to discuss her injuries. Michael steeled himself. How bad is it? Lucy has a fractured wrist, multiple contusions on her torso, and a concerning pattern of bruising on her back and arms. Her voice remained neutral, but her eyes held something darker. These injuries are inconsistent with typical childhood accidents. The implication hung in the air between them. You think someone hurt her deliberately? It wasn't a question. We are required by law to report suspected child abuse, Mr. Grant. I've already contacted Child Protective Services. They'll be interviewing Lucy in the morning. Anger flared, hot and sudden. You think Jessica did this? That's absurd. My daughter would never. I'm not making accusations, Dr. Reynolds interrupted. But Lucy's injuries have occurred over time. Some bruises are fresh, others healing. This suggests a pattern, not an isolated incident. Michael ran a hand through his silver hair, mind racing. Where's Jessica now? As I mentioned, she left shortly after bringing Lucy in. She appeared distressed, possibly in shock. Hospital security is searching, but she's not on the premises. Did Lucy say anything about what happened? Dr. Reynolds hesitated. She's been reluctant to speak about her injuries. That's not uncommon in these situations. Children often protect their caretakers, even abusive ones. I need to see her, Michael said firmly. The doctor nodded. Of course, just be gentle. She's frightened. Michael pushed open the door, his heart pounding. The hospital room seemed to swallow tiny Lucy, who lay curled on her side in the oversized bed. Her left arm was encased in a temporary cast, and an IV line snaked from her small hand to a machine beside the bed. Her honey blonde hair, so like Jessica's, was tangled around her face. Lucy, he whispered, approaching slowly. Her eyes opened, brilliant blue, just like Catherine's had been. For a moment she stared at him, then her face crumpled. Grandpa, she whimpered, reaching for him with her good arm. Michael moved to her side, carefully gathering her against his chest. She felt impossibly fragile bird bones and warm skin. She smelled of hospital soap and something uniquely Lucy. Crayons and strawberry shampoo. I've got you, sweetheart, he murmured into her hair. You're safe now. Lucy buried her face against his shirt. Is Mommy coming back? The question tore at him. I hope so, sweetheart. Can you tell me what happened? Who hurt you? Lucy stiffened in his arms. I fell, She whispered the words, muffled against his chest. Michael pulled back slightly, looking into her face. Lucy, you can tell me the truth. No one will hurt you again, I promise. Her eyes, so like Catherine's, filled with tears. Mommy said not to tell. She said he would be angry. Ice formed in Michael's veins. Who would be angry, Lucy? Before she could answer, the door swung open. Dr. Reynolds entered with another woman, stern middle-aged, with a badge clipped to her blazer. Mr. Grant, this is Detective Karen Wilson from Boston PD. She needs to ask Lucy some questions. Michael stood protectively beside the bed. Now she needs rest. Detective Wilson's expression softened slightly. I understand your concern, Mr. Grant, but time is critical in cases like this. If your granddaughter is in danger, we need to know immediately. Dr. Reynolds approached the bed, checking Lucy's vital signs. We're concerned about the timeline. Your daughter brought Lucy in at 1:43 a.m. with these injuries, then left abruptly at 1:57 a.m. Hospital security footage shows her running to her car. She appeared distressed. And you haven't heard from her? Detective Wilson asked. Michael shook his head. Nothing. This doesn't make sense. Jessica would never harm Lucy. I'd like to speak with Lucy alone, the detective said. Standard procedure in these cases. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but Dr. Reynolds touched his arm. Just for a few minutes. We have a family room down the hall where you can wait. Reluctantly, Michael leaned down to kiss Lucy's forehead. I'll be right outside, sweetheart. This nice lady needs to ask you some questions. Lucy's fingers clutched his sleeve. Don't leave me, Grandpa. The desperation in her voice nearly broke him. Just for a few minutes. I promise I'll come right back. Her fingers slowly released his sleeve, but her eyes never left his face as he backed toward the door. The family waiting room was empty at this hour, its uncomfortable chairs arranged around a small table, scattered with outdated magazines. Michael paced his phone pressed to his ear as Jessica's voicemail picked up for the fourth time. Jessica, it's Dad again. I'm at the hospital with Lucy. Please call me back immediately. Whatever's happening, we can fix it together. He ended the call, frustration mounting. Jessica hadn't answered his calls in weeks, not since their last argument. The memory of her tear-stained face still haunted him. You were never there when I needed you, she had screamed. Always the business first, family second. And now you think you can judge my choices, my husband. Michael had tried to explain his concerns about Richard. Something about the man never felt right, despite his impeccable credentials and charm. But Jessica had stormed out, taking Lucy with her. Now Lucy was injured, Jessica missing, and Michael felt the weight of his failures crushing down on him. Had he been so blind, so absent from his daughter's life, that he'd missed signs of trouble? The door opened and Detective Wilson entered, her expression grim. Mr. Grant, we have a situation. Lucy is reluctant to speak, but she did reveal that her injuries were not accidental. Michael's heart sank. Did Jessica? No, Wilson replied firmly. Lucy was clear that her mother did not harm her. In fact, she says her mother was trying to protect her. Relief flooded through Michael, followed immediately by confusion. Protect her from what? From whom? Detective Wilson hesitated. Lucy says her stepfather, Richard Reynolds, is responsible for her injuries. She claims he has also been physically abusive toward your daughter. The world seemed to tilt beneath Michael's feet. Richard. His protege. The brilliant financial advisor he'd personally mentored, then promoted to manage Grant Enterprises' investment division. The man he'd welcomed into his family when he married Jessica 3 years ago. That's impossible, Michael said automatically, but even as the words left his mouth, doubts surfaced. Jessica's growing isolation, her excuses for missed family events, the way Richard always answered her phone recently. I understand this is difficult to hear, Wilson continued, but we take allegations of domestic violence and child abuse very seriously. We're attempting to locate both your daughter and Mr. Reynolds now. I need to see Lucy, Michael insisted. Of course, but Mr. Grant, one more thing. Wilson's expression hardened. Child Protective Services will be making a determination about Lucy's placement within the next 24 hours. Until we locate your daughter or confirm the allegations against Mr. Reynolds, Lucy will either remain hospitalized or be placed in emergency foster care. That's absurd, Michael snapped. I'm her grandfather. Without established custody rights, it's not that simple. If you want to keep Lucy with you, you'll need to help us build a case against Mr. Reynolds and find your daughter. You have 24 hours before CPS makes their decision. 24 hours. The deadline hit Michael like a physical blow. 24 hours to find Jessica to understand what was happening in his daughter's home, to protect his granddaughter from a system that might separate them. "I understand," he said grimly. When Michael returned to Lucy's room, a nurse was helping her eat ice cream despite the late hour. The sight of her small face lighting up at the simple pleasure made his chest ache. How had he missed so much of her life? Always too busy with the next acquisition, the next board meeting, the next business trip. "Grandpa?" Lucy's face brightened when she saw him. "Hey, kiddo," he said, forcing a smile. "Ice cream at 4 in the morning? You're living the dream?" The nurse smiled. Her throat was sore from crying. "The cold helps?" Michael sat beside the bed, watching Lucy carefully maneuver the spoon with her uninjured hand. "Lucy, can I ask you something important?" She nodded, her expression suddenly wary. "The detective told me that Richard hurt you. Is that true?" Lucy's spoon froze halfway to her mouth. Her eyes darted to the nurse, then back to Michael. "It's okay, sweetheart," the nurse said gently. "You can tell your grandfather the truth. No one will be angry." Lucy placed the spoon back in the bowl, her appetite apparently gone. "He gets mad," she whispered. "Really mad. He hits Mommy when she tries to stop him from hurting me." Michael struggled to keep his expression neutral, though rage boiled inside him. "Has this happened before?" Lucy nodded. "Mommy said we had to leave. She packed our special bags. But he found out." "When was this, Lucy?" "Tonight. He was really, really mad. He broke Mommy's phone. He pushed her down the stairs." Lucy's voice trembled. "I tried to help her, but he grabbed my arm and it broke." She held up her cast. "Mommy screamed and hit him with a lamp. Then she grabbed me and we ran to the car." Michael fought to control his breathing. "Where's your mom now, Lucy?" "Did she say where she was going?" Lucy shook her head. "She said she had to get something important, something that would make Richard go away forever. She said to stay here, where it's safe, and that you would come." Michael's phone vibrated in his pocket. An unknown number. He excused himself and stepped into the hallway. "Grant," he answered tersely. "Michael." Jessica's voice was barely audible, thick with tears or pain, he couldn't tell which. "Jessica, where are you? Are you hurt?" "Listen to me," she whispered urgently. "Don't trust Richard. He's not who you think he is. I have proof. Proof of everything. The abuse, the embezzlement, all of it." "Embezzlement," Michael repeated, stunned. "Jessica, come to the hospital. We'll protect you." "No." The fear in her voice was palpable. "He has connections everywhere. I don't know who to trust. I need to secure the evidence first." "Where are you?" Michael demanded. "I'll come to you." "I can't tell you. It's not safe. Just protect Lucy. Don't let anyone take her, especially Richard. He'll use her to control me." "Jessica, please. Promise me, Dad." The desperation in her voice stunned him. "I promise. But Jessica, you have 24 hours before Child Protective Services makes a placement decision for Lucy. If we can't prove what Richard has done, they might take her." Silence stretched across the line. Then, "There's a lawyer, Victoria Bennett. She's been helping me build a case against Richard. Call her. She knows everything." The line went dead. Michael immediately tried calling back, but the call went straight to voicemail. Frustrated, he returned to Lucy's room where the young nurse was tucking her in. "She needs rest," the nurse said quietly. "The medication will help her sleep." Michael nodded, noticing Lucy's eyelids already drooping. "I'll stay with her." "Mr. Grant," the nurse hesitated, then continued. "My name is Sarah Peterson. I've cared for Lucy before, 3 times in the past year, each time with unexplained injuries." Michael stared at her. "Why wasn't this reported?" "It was," Sarah said, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Each time. But Mrs. Reynolds always had plausible explanations. A fall from a swing, a tumble downstairs, and Mr. Reynolds, he's very convincing, very respected." "You didn't believe them," Michael stated. Sarah shook her head. "Children who have accidents don't flinch when adults raise their hands. They don't apologize constantly for needing help. They don't make up elaborate stories to explain simple bruises." Michael felt sick. How had he missed this? His own granddaughter suffering while he remained oblivious, buried in work and his own grief. "Thank you for telling me," he said finally. Sarah nodded. "I'll be Lucy's nurse until shift change at 7. I'll make sure no one bothers her or takes her without your knowledge." Michael settled into the chair beside Lucy's bed, watching her chest rise and fall in sleep. The innocent vulnerability of her face triggered something primal within him, a fierce, protective instinct he hadn't felt since Jessica was small. His phone buzzed with an incoming email. The sender was Jessica, the subject line simply, "Evidence, open immediately." Michael tapped the screen, his heart racing. The email contained no message, just a single video attachment. He plugged in his earbuds and hit play. The video showed Richard in what appeared to be his home office, unaware of being filmed. He was on the phone, his manner completely transformed from the polished, respectful son-in-law Michael knew. This Richard was cold, calculating. "The old man suspects nothing," Richard was saying. "The blind transfer worked perfectly. Another week, and we'll have emptied the entire discretionary fund. 50 million untraceable." Michael felt the blood drain from his face. The discretionary investment fund, his personal project entrusted to Richard's management. The video continued, Richard laughing now. "Once I have control of the child, Jessica will sign whatever I want. The prenup becomes worthless if I have custody. Grant would rather sign over his company than see his precious granddaughter in my care." Rage unlike anything Michael had ever experienced surged through him. He forced himself to breathe deeply, to think clearly. This video was evidence of both financial crimes and premeditated abuse, using Lucy as leverage against Jessica and himself. The door to Lucy's room opened suddenly. Michael yanked out his earbuds, tensing for confrontation, but it was only Dr. Reynolds checking on her patient. "How is she?" the doctor asked softly. "Sleeping finally," Michael replied. "Doctor, I've received evidence confirming Lucy's account. Her stepfather has been abusing both her and my daughter." Dr. Reynolds' expression hardened. "I'll inform Detective Wilson immediately. This strengthens our case against him, but we still need to locate your daughter." "I'm working on that," Michael said. "There's also evidence of financial crimes, embezzlement from my company." The doctor raised an eyebrow. "That complicates matters. If there's money involved, he may become more dangerous when cornered." Michael nodded grimly. "I need to make some calls. Will you stay with Lucy?" "Of course." Michael stepped into the hallway, dialing the head of security for Grant Enterprises. Despite the hour, Walter answered on the second ring. "Sir, Walter, I need you to quietly lock down all financial systems immediately. No transfers, no access for anyone including me. Then I need a full audit of everything Richard Reynolds has touched. Priority 1. "Yes, sir. May I ask?" "No questions, Walter. Complete discretion is essential. I'll explain everything later." Michael ended that call and immediately dialed James Wilson, his personal attorney and most trusted advisor. "James, I apologize for the hour, but I have an emergency situation." Michael quickly outlined what had happened, including Jessica's disappearance and the evidence of Richard's crimes. "My God," James breathed when Michael finished. "I'll be at the hospital in 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'll contact Victoria Bennett. If she's been building a case against Richard, her evidence combined with yours could be enough for immediate action." "Thank you, James." As Michael ended the call, an alert from the hospital's entrance camera appeared on his phone, an app installed when Catherine was ill, allowing him to monitor who entered her room. Richard Reynolds was walking through the main entrance, his posture confident, his expression concerned. The perfect picture of a worried stepfather. Michael's hands clenched into fists. The man who had hurt Lucy, who had abused Jessica, who had stolen from him, was now walking into the hospital as if he had every right to be there. Moving quickly, Michael returned to Lucy's room. "He's here," he told Dr. Reynolds tersely. Her eyes widened. "Mr. Reynolds, yes, I need security in this room immediately." Dr. Reynolds nodded, picking up the phone by Lucy's bed. As she spoke quietly but urgently into the receiver, Michael moved to stand protectively beside his granddaughter. Lucy stirred in her sleep, her small face troubled even in dreams. Michael gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, making a silent vow. He had failed to protect Catherine from cancer, failed to be the father Jessica needed, failed to see the danger Richard posed, but he would not fail Lucy. Not again. The security guards arrived first. 2 large men who positioned themselves inside the room. Minutes later, Detective Wilson appeared, her expression grim. "Mr. Reynolds is at the reception desk," she informed them. "He's demanding to see Lucy, claiming rights as her stepfather." "You can't let him near her," Michael said firmly. "Don't worry, Mr. Grant. Based on Lucy's testimony and the evidence you've provided, we have enough to question him. But we need to be careful. If he feels cornered, he may become more dangerous." Detective Wilson's radio crackled with static. Then a voice announced, Subject is proceeding to pediatric emergency, approaching room 3. Michael moved to stand directly in front of Lucy's bed, a physical barrier between his granddaughter and the man who had hurt her. The door opened, and Richard Reynolds stepped into the room, momentarily surprised by the assembled group waiting for him. He recovered quickly, his handsome face arranging itself into an expression of concern. "Michael," he said smoothly, "thank God you're here. I just heard about Lucy's accident." Michael stared at the man he had once trusted, once welcomed into his family, seeing him clearly for the first time. Behind the polished exterior, behind the calculated charm, was something cold and predatory. "It wasn't an accident," Michael said evenly. "We know what you did, Richard, to Lucy, to Jessica." Richard's facade didn't slip. "I have no idea what you're talking about. Where's Jessica? She called me in hysterics something about Lucy falling down the stairs. I came as quickly as I could." Detective Wilson stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds, we have reason to believe Lucy's injuries were inflicted deliberately by you." Richard's expression shifted to one of shocked indignation. "That's absurd. I would never harm Lucy. I love her like she's my own daughter." As if awakened by his voice, Lucy stirred in the bed. Her eyes fluttered open, immediately focusing on Richard. The change was instantaneous. Her body stiffened. Her breathing quickened. Her uninjured hand clutched at the blankets. Pure terror radiated from her small form. It was all the confirmation Michael needed. He moved to block Richard's view of Lucy, but not before catching the flash of something dark and ugly in his son-in-law's eyes. A momentary glimpse of the true man beneath the mask. "Richard Reynolds," Detective Wilson announced formally, "I need you to come with me for questioning regarding allegations of child abuse and domestic violence." Richard's smile became razor sharp. "Of course, Detective, I have nothing to hide, but first, I'd like a moment with my stepdaughter." "That's not happening," Michael said flatly. Richard's eyes narrowed. "I have legal rights, Michael. Lucy is in my custody while Jessica is indisposed." "Actually, Mr. Reynolds," Dr. Reynolds interjected, "as Lucy's treating physician, I've made the determination that contact with you would be detrimental to her health and recovery." Richard's mask slipped further, anger flashing across his features before he controlled it. "This is ridiculous. I demand to see my stepdaughter. I have court documents establishing my guardianship." He reached into his jacket, producing an official-looking document. Detective Wilson took it, scanning the contents quickly. "This appears to be a temporary guardianship order," she confirmed, frowning. "Signed by Judge Marcus Hamilton." Michael felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. Hamilton was known for his conservative views on family preservation, and for his connections to several board members at Grant Enterprises. Richard smiled triumphantly. "As you can see, I have full legal authority to remove Lucy from the hospital and take her home. Now, if you'll excuse us—" "That won't be possible," Dr. Reynolds said firmly. "Lucy requires medical observation for at least 24 hours due to the severity of her injuries and potential concussion." "Then I'll stay with her," Richard insisted, "as her legal guardian." The standoff was interrupted by the arrival of a new figure, a tall, elegant woman with sharp eyes and an air of absolute authority. She strode into the room like she owned it, nodding briskly to Detective Wilson. "Victoria Bennett," she announced, fixing Richard with a penetrating stare. "Attorney for Jessica Reynolds in her divorce proceedings against Richard Reynolds." Richard's confidence visibly faltered. "What divorce proceedings? This is preposterous." Victoria smiled thinly, opening her briefcase and extracting a folder. "Divorce petition filed last week, Mr. Reynolds. Along with these," she handed several documents to Detective Wilson, affidavits documenting your history of domestic violence and child abuse. "And this," she produced a USB drive, "contains financial records showing systematic embezzlement from Grant Enterprises over the past 18 months. Richard's facade cracked completely, his face contorting with rage. "You bitch, where's Jessica? What has she told you?" "Enough, Mr. Reynolds," Victoria said calmly. "More than enough." Detective Wilson stepped forward. "Mr. Reynolds, please place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for domestic violence, child abuse, and financial fraud." Richard's eyes darted around the room, calculating his options. Then, with the desperate speed of a cornered animal, he lunged toward Lucy's bed. Michael moved without thinking, decades of boxing in his youth coming back instinctively. He stepped into Richard's path, blocking him with his body, then delivered a single powerful punch directly to his son-in-law's jaw. Richard crumpled to the floor, stunned, as the security guards rushed forward to restrain him. In the bed, Lucy began to cry, not the hysterical sobs of fear, but the quiet, relieved tears of a child who finally feels safe. Michael turned to her, his hand aching from the impact, and gathered her gently in his arms. "It's okay, sweetheart," he murmured against her hair. "He can't hurt you anymore, I promise." As Richard was handcuffed and led from the room, still shouting threats and accusations, Victoria Bennett approached Michael. "Mr. Grant," she said quietly, "we need to talk about Jessica. She's in danger, and we have very little time." Michael nodded, still holding Lucy close. "Tell me everything." The sun was rising over Boston, painting the hospital room in shades of gold and amber. A new day was beginning, one that would determine not only Lucy's future, but Jessica's survival and the very foundation of everything Michael had built. He had 24 hours to save his family, 24 hours to atone for a lifetime of putting business before those he loved most, 24 hours to become the protector his daughter and granddaughter desperately needed. For the first time in 10 years since losing Catherine, Michael Grant felt truly alive. The numbness that had enveloped him shattered under the weight of this new purpose. He would save them, no matter the cost, no matter what he had to sacrifice, the final protector. It was a role he should have embraced long ago. The morning light filtering through hospital blinds found Michael Grant sitting vigil beside Lucy's bed. He hadn't slept, his mind racing with strategies and contingencies. Victoria Bennett sat across from him, her elegant appearance remarkably unruffled despite the early hour. Between them lay scattered documents, financial records, police reports, and medical files, the paper trail of Richard's crimes. "The temporary guardianship order is problematic," Victoria said, tapping the court document with a manicured nail. "Judge Hamilton is notorious for favoring fathers in custody disputes. The fact that Richard obtained this so quickly suggests he has influence there." Michael's jaw tightened. "Hamilton golfs with 3 of my board members. Richard likely leveraged those connections." Victoria nodded. "Exactly. Which is why, despite his arrest, we're still operating under a deadline. Once Richard makes bail, and he will, he could legally take Lucy, unless we find Jessica, and obtain countermanding orders." Lucy stirred in her sleep, her small face scrunching momentarily before relaxing again. The bruises on her arms stood out starkly against her pale skin, yellowed at the edges from previous abuse. Michael felt a fresh wave of rage seeing the evidence of Richard's cruelty. "Tell me about my daughter," he said quietly. "How long has this been happening?" Victoria's professional demeanor softened slightly. "Jessica came to me 3 months ago. The abuse had been escalating for about a year. It began, as it often does, with emotional control, isolating her from friends and family, monitoring her calls and movements, constant criticism. The physical abuse started after she confronted him about the company finances." Michael closed his eyes briefly, the weight of his failure pressing down on him. 3 months. His daughter had been planning her escape for 3 months while he'd been consumed with international expansions and merger negotiations. "She tried to tell me," he admitted, "at that dinner in March. She said Richard had changed, that he wasn't the man I thought he was. I dismissed it as marital problems, told her to work it out." Victoria didn't offer empty reassurances. "Jessica didn't blame you. She knew how convincing Richard could be. He cultivated his image carefully. Where is she now?" "Your text said you had a lead." Victoria lowered her voice, though Lucy remained asleep. "Jessica established several safe houses over the past months, places Richard wouldn't know about. We think she's at one of them gathering the remaining evidence. The problem is, she hasn't contacted me since she left the hospital." "Which means something's wrong," Michael concluded grimly. "Possibly. Or she's being cautious. Richard has threatened to kill her if she ever tried to leave him. She may be maintaining communication blackout for safety." Michael checked his watch. 7:13 a.m., less than 18 hours before Child Protective Services would make their determination about Lucy's placement. Less than 18 hours to find Jessica and secure Lucy's safety. His phone vibrated with an incoming call. James Wilson, his attorney, and now private investigator into Richard's crimes. "James," Michael answered. "What have you found?" "The financial situation is worse than we thought," James replied without preamble. Reynolds has systematically siphoned approximately $63 million from various accounts over the past 18 months. He used a complex network of shell companies, but the ultimate destination appears to be an account in the Cayman Islands. Michael exhaled slowly. Can we recover it? We're working on freezing the accounts now, but Michael, there's more. Reynolds didn't act alone. Someone with higher clearance had to authorize these transfers. Cold realization dawned. Someone on my executive team. Yes, we're narrowing down the possibilities now. A betrayal within his inner circle. Michael shouldn't have been surprised. His focus on business had always come at the expense of truly knowing the people around him, even those he trusted most. There's something else, James continued. Reynolds made a call after his arrest, to Robert Keller. Michael tensed. Robert Keller, his CFO and right-hand man for 15 years. You're sure? Positive. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Keep digging. And James, be careful. If Keller is involved, we can't trust anyone at the company. Michael ended the call meeting Victoria's questioning gaze. We have another problem. Richard had accomplices within Grant Enterprises, including possibly my CFO. Victoria's expression hardened. That explains how he obtained the guardianship order so quickly. If your executives have Judge Hamilton's ear, then Richard still has power even from jail. Michael finished her thought. A soft knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah Peterson, the night nurse who had cared for Lucy, entered the room. Though her shift had ended, she hadn't left. Mr. Grant, she said quietly, there's a Detective Wilson here to see you. She says it's urgent. Michael nodded. Send her in. Detective Wilson entered looking grim. We have a situation. Richard Reynolds made bail 30 minutes ago. Already, Victoria stood up alarmed. That's impossible. The charges are serious. Judge Hamilton set bail at $1 million. It was paid immediately in cash. Wilson's expression conveyed her disgust. There's more. We found Jessica Reynolds' Zhao, abandoned at Franklin Park. There was blood on the driver's seat. Michael felt the world tilt beneath him. Blood, how much? Not enough to indicate a fatal injury, but enough to suggest she's hurt. Forensics is processing the scene now. We've issued a bolo for both Jessica Reynolds and Richard Reynolds. Lucy whimpered in her sleep as if sensing the tension in the room. Michael moved to her side, instinctively smoothing her hair with a gentle hand. We need to move Lucy, he said firmly. If Richard is out, he'll come for her. Detective Wilson nodded. I've already arranged for a police guard outside her door, but Mr. Grant, there's something else you should know. Richard Reynolds filed an emergency petition this morning claiming you assaulted him and are an unfit guardian for Lucy. There's a hearing scheduled for 4 p.m. today. Victoria cursed under her breath. Hamilton again. Yes, Wilson confirmed. I wish I could say the system isn't this corrupt, but what do we need to win this hearing? Michael asked, cutting to the heart of the matter. Victoria considered. Ideally, Jessica herself. Her testimony would override anything Richard claims. Without her, we need overwhelming evidence of his abuse and financial crimes, enough to force even Hamilton to acknowledge Richard is unfit. I might be able to help with that, Sarah interjected. Everyone turned to look at the nurse, who had remained quietly by the door. I've been documenting Lucy's injuries for months. Photos, detailed notes, timestamps of when they brought her in. I reported my concerns, but they were dismissed. I kept my own records, though. Hope flared in Michael's chest. Would you testify to this? Sarah nodded firmly, without hesitation. What that man did to this little girl. She trailed off, emotion choking her voice. Thank you, Michael said sincerely. That could make all the difference. As if on cue, Lucy's eyes fluttered open. She blinked sleepily, then focused on Michael. Grandpa, you're still here. The surprise in her voice broke his heart. She had expected him to leave, as he had so many times before when business called. I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart, he promised, taking her small hand in his. How are you feeling? My arm hurts, she said softly. Is Mommy back yet? Michael exchanged glances with Detective Wilson, who gave a small shake of her head. A warning not to frighten the child. Not yet, Lucy, but we're looking for her. Lucy's blue eyes filled with tears. Richard's going to find her first. He said he would. He said he'd hurt her if we ever tried to leave. Michael sat carefully on the edge of the bed. Lucy, can you tell me about last night? What happened before your mom brought you to the hospital? Lucy's fingers tightened around his. Mommy was packing our special bags, the ones she keeps in the secret place in my closet. She said we were going to go on an adventure, just the two of us. And then, Michael prompted gently, Richard came home early. He wasn't supposed to be there. He saw the bags and got really mad. Lucy's voice dropped to a whisper. He started yelling and breaking things. Mommy told me to hide in my special place, the cabinet under the stairs. but I was scared for her. Victoria moved closer, her recorder discreetly capturing Lucy's account. What happened next, Lucy? Richard was hurting Mommy. I ran out to help her, and he grabbed my arm really hard. It made a cracking sound. Lucy looked down at her cast. Mommy screamed. She hit Richard with the big lamp from the table. He fell down and didn't move. That's when we ran to the car. And then your mom brought you to the hospital, Detective Wilson asked. Lucy nodded. She was crying and her head was bleeding. She said she had to get the special folder from her hiding place, and then we could be free from Richard forever. Do you know where this hiding place is, Lucy? Michael asked. Lucy hesitated, her eyes darting between the adults. I promise not to tell anyone. It's a secret. Michael gently squeezed her hand. I know, sweetheart. But your mommy might be hurt. She might need our help. It's okay to tell us this secret if it helps us find her. Lucy bit her lip, clearly torn between keeping her promise and helping her mother. Finally, she whispered, the old house, where Grandma used to live before she went to heaven. Michael froze. Catherine's lake house, the small property outside the city that he'd kept after her death, unable to bear selling it despite never visiting. Of course, the perfect hiding place. Richard would never think to look there, and Jessica had a key. Good girl, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You did exactly the right thing. Lucy's eyes suddenly widened with fear fixed on something beyond Michael's shoulder. He turned to find Robert Keller standing in the doorway, his tall frame blocking the exit. Behind him, the police officer, who should have been guarding the door, was nowhere to be seen. Michael, Keller said smoothly, I came as soon as I heard. How's our little girl doing? Our little girl. The phrase sent alarm bells ringing in Michael's mind. Keller had met Lucy perhaps twice at company functions. The familiarity was deliberate, a message. Michael stood positioning himself between Lucy's bed and the door. Robert, this is unexpected. I thought you might need support. Keller's gaze swept the room, noting Detective Wilson and Victoria with calculated assessment. The company is in an uproar over Richard's arrest. The board is calling for an emergency meeting. The board can wait, Michael replied coldly. My family takes precedence. Something ugly flickered across Keller's handsome features. Of course, family first. Though I'm surprised to hear you say that, Michael. It hasn't been your philosophy these past 10 years. The barb struck home, but Michael didn't flinch. People change. What do you really want, Robert? Keller smiled thinly. Just to deliver a message. From Richard. He says there's still a way to resolve this quietly. The evidence Jessica gathered in exchange for his cooperation in the divorce. No criminal charges, no public scandal. Victoria stepped forward. My client isn't interested in negotiations. Mr. Reynolds will face the full consequences of his actions. Your client isn't here, Keller pointed out, and time is running out. The hearing is at 4. If Jessica doesn't appear, Lucy goes with her legal guardian, Richard. Richard isn't coming anywhere near this child, Michael stated flatly. Keller shrugged. That's not for you to decide, Michael. It's for the court. Unless, of course, Jessica returns with her so-called evidence. The implication was clear. They knew where Jessica was, or at least they were looking for her. The race was on. Tell Richard he can go to hell, Michael said evenly. Keller's false pleasantry vanished. You're making a mistake, Michael. One that will cost you everything. Your company, your reputation, and possibly your daughter's life. Richard is not a man who forgives betrayal. Detective Wilson moved forward, hand on her weapon. Mr. Keller, that sounded remarkably like a threat. Would you care to clarify? Keller's smile returned cold and professional. Not at all, Detective. Simply conveying the emotional state of a concerned husband and stepfather. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a board meeting to prepare for. He turned to leave, then paused, looking back at Michael. You have until 4 o'clock, Michael. Choose wisely. After Keller left, Michael turned to Detective Wilson. We need to get to the lake house. Now. I'll arrange for a police escort, she replied. No, Michael said firmly. No police. If Richard has people watching, they'll notice. Victoria and I will go alone. That's too dangerous, Wilson protested. Reynolds is desperate and violent. If he finds you there, he won't, Michael interrupted. The property is secluded, accessible only by private road. I'll know if anyone follows us. And Lucy, Victoria asked, she can't stay here, not with Keller knowing where she is. Michael had already considered this. Sarah, would you be willing to take Lucy to your home just until we find Jessica? The nurse looked startled. Me? But I'm not family. Exactly. No one would think to look for her with you, and you've proven how much you care for her welfare. Sarah hesitated only briefly. Of course, I have a spare room and my sister can help watch her. It's settled then, Michael said, turning to Lucy. Sweetheart Nurse Sarah is going to take you to her house for a little while. It's like a secret mission. You'll be safe there until I come back with your mom. Lucy looked uncertain. You promise you'll come back with Mommy? The naked vulnerability in her question pierced him. How many promises had he broken to Jessica over the years? How many times had he chosen work over family? I promise, he said with a conviction that surprised even him. Nothing is more important. Within the hour, they had executed the plan. Lucy, disguised in a hoodie and accompanied by Sarah, left through a service entrance, while a decoy child in a wheelchair was escorted out the main door with a heavy police presence, a distraction for any watching eyes. Michael and Victoria drove separately to a meeting point outside the city, then continued together in Michael's Audi, taking a circuitous route to ensure they weren't followed. The lake house was an hour's drive from Boston, nestled among pine trees on the shore of a small private lake. Jessica loved this place as a child, Michael said as they turned onto the unpaved private road. Catherine would bring her here every summer while I stayed in the city working. I told myself they were having mother-daughter time, that I was giving them space. The truth is, I was giving myself an excuse not to participate. Victoria didn't offer platitudes. You're here now. That counts for something. The lake house came into view, a modest 2-story cabin with a wide porch overlooking the water. Michael felt a pang of nostalgia mixed with grief. He hadn't been here since Catherine's funeral. Jessica had asked him to sell it, unable to bear the memories, but he'd kept it paying for maintenance while never visiting. Another failure, holding on to the physical reminder while neglecting the emotional legacy. He parked some distance from the house, not wanting to announce their arrival. Stay behind me, he instructed Victoria as they approached on foot. The house appeared empty, curtains drawn across the windows. The front door was locked, but Michael still had his key. He opened it slowly, listening for any sound within. Jessica, he called softly. It's Dad! Are you here? Silence answered him. The interior was dim dust covers still draped over the furniture. But as his eyes adjusted to the gloom, Michael noticed subtle signs of recent occupation. A water glass on the kitchen counter, cushions disturbed on the couch. She was here, Victoria confirmed, examining the glass. Recently. They moved through the house, methodically checking each room. Nothing appeared disturbed until they reached Catherine's old study, a small room overlooking the lake. Here the desk drawers had been pulled open, papers scattered across the surface. Someone was searching for something, Michael observed, examining the papers. Most were old bills and correspondence, nothing of significance. Victoria approached the desk, her sharp eyes scanning the disorder. Or someone found what they were looking for and left in a hurry. Michael's phone vibrated in his pocket, a text from an unknown number. Lake Dock, come alone. And he showed the message to Victoria, who immediately shook her head. It could be a trap, or it could be Jessica, Michael countered. She would be cautious about revealing herself. Then I'll stay here out of sight. If you're not back in 10 minutes, I'm calling Wilson. Michael nodded and made his way through the back door onto the path leading down to the lake. The wooden dock extended 30 feet into the water, and at its end, a familiar figure stood gazing out at the horizon. Jessica. Relief flooded through him as he approached. She was alive, injured. He could see bandages on her arm and a bruise darkening her temple, but alive. Jessica, he called softly. She turned her face a mirror of Catherine's at the same age. Beautiful, despite the bruising, her blonde hair lifting slightly in the breeze. But her eyes were haunted, ringed with exhaustion and fear. Dad, she said, her voice breaking. You came. Of course I came. He moved toward her, arms outstretched, but she backed away. No, stay there. We might be watched. Michael froze. Lucy told us where to find you. She's safe, Jessica. With someone Richard doesn't know. Jessica nodded, tears filling her eyes. Is she... How badly did he hurt her? Fractured wrist bruises. She'll heal, but she needs her mother. Jessica turned back toward the lake, her shoulders rigid with tension. I got everything, Dad. All the evidence. Bank records, transfer authorizations, offshore account numbers. And videos. He recorded himself threatening me, hurting Lucy when she cried. He kept them like trophies. Disgust and rage churned in Michael's stomach. Where is this evidence now? Hidden. Not here. I moved it when I realized they were following me. Richard and Robert. They've been partners all along. Robert was the one who suggested Richard pursue me in the first place, a way to access Grant Enterprises from the inside. And the betrayal cut deep. Robert Keller, his trusted advisor for 15 years. The man he'd chosen over his own family countless times, canceling dinners and vacations to work late with Robert on deals and strategies. Jessica, we need to get you somewhere safe. There's a hearing at 4 o'clock. If you testify about the abuse, Richard loses any claim to Lucy. Jessica shook her head, fear evident in every line of her body. I can't. He'll kill me if I testify. He promised he would. That's why I needed the evidence, so the truth would come out even if I couldn't tell it myself. Michael took a careful step closer. We won't let that happen. The police are involved now. Victoria Bennett is working on your case. We can protect you. Like you protected Mom. The words escaped before Jessica could stop them, sharp with years of buried pain. Michael flinched as if struck. Catherine's cancer wasn't something I could fight, Jessica. This is different. Is it? Jessica's voice was bitter. You weren't there when she needed you most. Always at the office building, your precious company, while she died alone in hospital rooms. And then you weren't there for me either. The truth of her accusation left Michael momentarily speechless. She was right. He had failed them both, retreating into work, rather than facing the pain of Catherine's illness and death. You're right, he finally said. I failed you both. I chose the company over family again and again. I told myself I was providing for you, securing your future, but the truth is, I was hiding. Work was easier than watching Catherine suffer, easier than being a single father to a grieving daughter. Jessica's expression softened slightly at his admission. I needed you, Dad, not your money, not the big house or expensive schools, just you. I know that now, Michael said, his voice rough with emotion, and I can't change the past. But I can be here now for you and Lucy. Please, Jessica, let me try to make this right. She hesitated, years of disappointment warring with desperate need. How can I trust you won't choose the company again when this is over? Because I've seen what it cost me, Michael replied simply. Watching Lucy in that hospital bed, terrified and hurt, knowing you were in danger somewhere. Nothing else matters. Not the company, not the money. Just you and Lucy. Jessica studied his face, searching for signs of insincerity. Whatever she saw must have convinced her, because she nodded slowly. The evidence is with Dr. Torres, Mom's old oncologist. I trust her. She's kept it in her personal safe at the hospital. Good choice, Michael agreed. Richard would never think to look there. Jessica took a step toward him, then stopped, her gaze shifting to something beyond his shoulder. Her eyes widened in terror. Dad behind you? Michael turned just as Richard emerged from the trees. At the top of the path, a pistol held casually at his side. Touching reunion? Richard called, his voice carrying clearly across the still air. Almost made me believe you, Michael. That whole family first speech. Very convincing. Michael positioned himself between Jessica and Richard, calculating the distance between them. Too far to rush him before he could use the gun. It's over, Richard, Michael said calmly. The police know everything. The company accounts are frozen. You've lost. Richard laughed, the sound chilling in its genuine amusement. Lost? I'm just getting started, Michael. Do you really think I didn't have contingency plans? The money was just phase 1. The real prize is control of Grant Enterprises itself. You'll never get it, Michael stated flatly. Won't I? Richard's smile was reptilian. The board meets in 2 hours. Robert is presenting evidence that you've been embezzling funds using offshore accounts to hide millions. Your fingerprints are all over the transactions thanks to some creative paperwork. By evening, you'll be voted out and facing criminal charges. Michael felt Jessica's hand grip his arm, seeking reassurance he wasn't sure he could provide. And Lucy? Michael asked, playing for time, aware that Victoria was likely watching from the house, hopefully calling for help. My stepdaughter. Richard's expression softened into a parody of concern. Poor child, traumatized by her grandfather's criminal behavior and her mother's tragic accident. Accident? Jessica's voice rose in fear. Richard gestured with the gun toward the lake. Drowning is common around here, especially for someone distraught over family scandal. They might not find your body for days. Michael's mind raced, searching for options. They couldn't outrun a bullet. Help might not arrive in time. He needed to keep Richard talking. Why Jessica? He asked. Why target my daughter specifically? Richard's smile widened. Ask Robert. It was his idea. Find his weakness, he said. Michael Grant doesn't care about anyone, but he might care about Catherine's daughter. Robert's been planning this for years, Michael, ever since you passed him over for CEO and kept him as your subordinate. The revelation struck Michael like a physical blow. Robert's resentment had been simmering for over a decade, hidden behind loyal smiles and dedicated service. "And you," Michael pressed, "what's your motivation beyond money?" Richard shrugged. "I started for the money, the challenge, but I stayed for the power." His gaze shifted to Jessica, something possessive and twisted in his expression. "And other benefits." Jessica shrank back, and Michael felt a surge of protective rage, unlike anything he'd experienced before. "You won't touch her again," he growled. "Bold words from a man about to die," Richard replied, raising the gun. "Goodbye, Michael. I'd say it's been a pleasure, but honestly, you've been a disappointment. Catherine always said you were formidable. I haven't seen it." The mention of Catherine's name in Richard's mouth ignited something primal in Michael. As Richard's finger tightened on the trigger, Michael lunged forward, pushing Jessica aside and charging toward his son-in-law with reckless abandon. The gun fired, once, twice, the sound cracking across the peaceful lake. Michael felt a searing pain in his shoulder, but didn't slow colliding with Richard with the full force of his larger frame. They crashed to the ground, the gun skittering away across the wooden dock. Years of suppressed rage fueled Michael as he grappled with the younger man. Richard was fit-trained in some form of combat, but Michael had raw power and the desperate strength of a father protecting his child. He landed a solid punch to Richard's jaw, following with another to his ribs. Richard retaliated his knee, driving into Michael's wounded shoulder. Pain exploded through Michael's body, momentarily blinding him. Richard seized the advantage, rolling on top and wrapping his hands around Michael's throat. "I'm going to enjoy this," Richard hissed, tightening his grip, watching the great Michael Grant die like a dog. Black spots danced at the edges of Michael's vision as his airway constricted. Through the encroaching darkness, he saw Jessica scrambling toward the discarded gun, Richard too focused on killing him to notice. With his remaining strength, Michael brought his knee up sharply, connecting with Richard's groin. The younger man howled in pain, his grip loosening just enough for Michael to suck in a desperate breath and buck him off. They both staggered to their feet, circling each other on the narrow dock. Blood streamed from Michael's shoulder, soaking his shirt. Richard's perfect appearance was disheveled, now his eyes wild with hatred. "Even if you kill me," Michael gasped, "you'll never win. Jessica will testify. The evidence will disappear," Richard snarled. "Just like you, just like Jessica, and Lucy will be mine to shape as I see fit." The casual threat against his granddaughter triggered something deep in Michael's psyche. With a roar of pure rage, he charged again, tackling Richard with enough force to send them both crashing through the dock's weathered railing. They hit the cold water of the lake together, still locked in combat. The shock of immersion momentarily separated them. Michael surfaced first, gasping his wounded shoulder, screaming in protest. Richard emerged seconds later, lunging toward him with murderous intent. They grappled in the water, each trying to force the other under. Richard was the stronger swimmer, quickly gaining the advantage as Michael's blood loss weakened him. "You should have stayed in your office, Michael," Richard taunted, pushing him under. Water closed over Michael's head. In the muffled silence beneath the surface, a strange calm descended. Images flashed before him. Catherine smiling on their wedding day, Jessica's graduation, Lucy's tiny face in the hospital. His family, the people he'd neglected for an empire of steel and glass. No more. With renewed determination, Michael fought his way back to the surface, breaking free of Richard's grip, just long enough to suck in precious air. As Richard moved to force him down again, a gunshot cracked across the water. Richard jerked, his expression one of comical surprise, as blood blossomed across his shoulder, a mirror to Michael's own wound. Behind him, Jessica stood on the remains of the dock, the pistol steady in her hands. "Get away from my father!" she commanded, her voice stronger than Michael had heard it in years. Richard snarled, starting to lunge toward her, but Jessica fired again, a warning shot that splintered the wood near his head. "The next one won't miss," she promised. Richard hesitated, calculating his odds. Then sirens wailed in the distance. Victoria's call for help finally answered. His face contorted with fury, but self-preservation won out. "This isn't over," he spat before striking out toward the far shore of the lake. Michael struggled toward the dock, his strength fading rapidly. Jessica dropped the gun and reached for him, helping him climb the ladder onto the splintered wooden platform. He collapsed shivering as Jessica pressed her hand against his wound. "Dad, stay with me. Help is coming." Michael looked up at his daughter, brave, resilient, so much like her mother, and felt a surge of pride, unlike anything his business accomplishments had ever provided. "You saved me," he managed through chattering teeth. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "We saved each other." As police sirens grew louder and the wail of an ambulance joined them, Michael reached up to touch Jessica's cheek. "Lucy," he whispered, suddenly afraid. "Is safe," Jessica assured him. "You promised, remember, and this time I believe you." The simple statement, her trust restored after so many years, meant more than any business deal he'd ever closed. As darkness crept in around the edges of his vision, Michael held on to that single thought. This time I didn't fail them. The next hours passed in fragments for Michael. The ambulance ride, emergency surgery to remove the bullet from his shoulder, police statements, and finally a hospital room, not unlike the one he'd left that morning. The difference was that this time he was the patient. Victoria Bennett stood at the foot of his bed, looking remarkably composed despite the day's events. "Richard escaped," she reported grimly. "Police are searching, but he had a boat waiting on the far side of the lake." Michael nodded, unsurprised. Richard had proven himself meticulous in planning. And Robert, arrested at the board meeting. When he realized the embezzlement evidence was compromised, he tried to flee. They caught him at Logan Airport with $2 million in cash and a passport under a different name. The hearing, postponed until tomorrow given the circumstances, but Judge Hamilton has been temporarily removed from the case pending an ethics investigation. His connections to Robert Keller have raised serious concerns about impartiality. Michael absorbed this information, relief washing through him, despite the throbbing pain in his shoulder. And Lucy, Jessica, Victoria's professional demeanor softened. Safe, both of them. Lucy is still with Nurse Peterson, and Jessica is giving her statement to Detective Wilson. They'll be here soon. As if summoned by her words, the door opened and Jessica entered. Her injuries treated her face, pale but composed. Behind her came Sarah Peterson, holding Lucy's hand. "Grandpa!" Lucy broke free, running to his bedside. She stopped short at the sight of his bandages, her eyes widening. "You're hurt." "Just a scratch," Michael assured her with a smile. "Nothing that won't heal." Lucy climbed carefully onto the edge of his bed, mindful of her own cast. "Did the bad man hurt you?" "He tried," Michael said simply, "but your mom stopped him." Lucy looked at Jessica with newfound admiration. "Mommy was brave." "The bravest," Michael confirmed, extending his good arm to Jessica, who stepped forward to take his hand. "Just like you." For a moment, they remained there, 3 generations joined by blood, and now by shared survival. Michael felt something shift within him, a reordering of priorities so profound it took his breath away. The empire he'd built, the wealth he'd accumulated, the power he'd wielded, none of it compared to these 2 lives entrusted to his protection. Victoria cleared her throat softly. "I hate to interrupt, but there's something you should know, Michael. The board meeting proceeded in Robert's absence. They voted to suspend you pending investigation into the company's finances." Michael expected to feel anger, perhaps even panic at this news. Instead, a strange sense of liberation washed over him. "Let them investigate. I have nothing to hide." "It means you may lose control of the company," Victoria pressed, clearly concerned by his reaction. Michael glanced at Jessica, then at Lucy, who had curled trustingly against his side. "Then I lose it. There are more important things." Jessica's eyes widened in surprise. "Dad, you don't mean that. Grant Enterprises is your life's work." "No," Michael corrected gently. "You are my life's work. You and Lucy. I just lost sight of that for a while." Detective Wilson entered the room, her expression grave. "Mr. Grant, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we have a situation. Richard Reynolds has issued a statement to the press, claiming you attacked him without provocation and accusing you of orchestrating the embezzlement to frame him." Michael absorbed this news calmly. "And the evidence from Dr. Torres? Secured. We've begun analyzing it, but there's a lot to process. Financial records, videos, emails. It will take time." "Time we may not have," Victoria interjected. "Richard is moving quickly to control the narrative." Michael considered this. Throughout his career, he had faced challenges, competitors who sought to undermine him, markets that threatened to collapse. He had always prevailed through strategy, patience, and calculated risk. "Detective," he said finally. "I'd like to make a statement of my own. To the press. Tonight." Wilson looked skeptical. "Are you sure that's wise? Your legal situation is precarious." "I'm sure," Michael replied firmly. "For too long, I've allowed work to take precedence over what truly matters. I won't make that mistake again. Richard Reynolds has threatened my family for the last time." Jessica squeezed his hand, a silent show of support that meant more than words could express. "What about the company?" Victoria asked. "The board could interpret a public statement as grounds for permanent removal." Michael's gaze fell on Lucy, who had fallen asleep against him, her small body trusting and vulnerable. The choice wasn't even a choice anymore. "Then they remove me," he said simply. "Some things are worth losing everything for." As the adults discussed strategy, Michael held his sleeping granddaughter close, the weight of her trust both burden and blessing. Richard was still out there wounded and desperate, more dangerous than ever. The battle for his family's safety was far from over. But for the first time in decades, Michael Grant was absolutely certain of his purpose. The empire might fall, his reputation might be destroyed, his wealth might vanish. None of it mattered compared to the sleeping child in his arms, and the daughter who had found the courage to fight her own demons. He was no longer the businessman who built Grant Enterprises. He was something far more important, the final protector, the role he was born to play. Dawn broke over Boston Memorial Hospital, pale light filtering through the blinds as Michael Grant stood at the window of his room, shoulder throbbing beneath fresh bandages. The television murmured behind him, broadcasting his own face alongside grainy security footage of Richard fleeing the lake house. Grant Enterprises CEO, Michael Grant, remains hospitalized following a violent confrontation with his son-in-law, Richard Reynolds, the reporter announced. Reynolds, who remains at large, claims Grant orchestrated an embezzlement scheme and assaulted him without provocation. Sources close to the investigation tell us evidence suggests otherwise. Michael turned as James Wilson entered, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the weary expression of a man who hadn't slept. "You look worse than I feel," Michael observed. James managed a tight smile. "The emergency board meeting ran until 3 a.m. He straightened professional despite his exhaustion. "The board has voted to place you on administrative leave pending investigation. Robert Keller was arrested attempting to flee the country, but the damage is done. He's implicated you in the embezzlement scheme, claiming he acted under your direct orders." Michael nodded, the news expected but still stinging. 30 years building Grant Enterprises, only to be pushed aside based on a subordinate's lies. A week ago, this would have devastated him. Now it registered as a distant concern compared to Jessica and Lucy's safety. "The financial evidence Jessica collected, being analyzed," James interrupted. "It's complicated deliberately so. Richard and Robert created an intricate network of transactions with your digital signature. Forensic accounting believes they can prove forgery, but it will take time." "Which we don't have," Michael said quietly, checking his watch. "The custody hearing is at 2. James squeezed Michael's good shoulder reassuringly. "Victoria is with Jessica now, preparing her testimony. The evidence against Richard is overwhelming, even without the financial crimes." The door opened as Detective Wilson entered, her face grave. "Mr. Grant, we have a situation. Richard Reynolds was spotted at Sarah Peterson's apartment 30 minutes ago." Michael's blood froze. "Lucy is safe," Wilson assured him quickly. Ms. Peterson refused to open the door and called 911 immediately. Officers responded, but Reynolds had already fled. "How did he find them?" Michael demanded, anger flaring. "That information was confidential." Wilson's expression hardened. "We've identified a leak. Hospital security footage shows Dr. Thomas Klein, the night shift attending physician, accessing Lucy's discharge records at 12:47 a.m. He then made a call from the staff lounge." "Klein," Michael repeated. "The name's not familiar." "It shouldn't be," Wilson confirmed. "He joined the staff 3 months ago. However, his background check was remarkably clean, suspiciously so. We've since discovered he previously worked at a private clinic in New York, where Richard Reynolds was a major donor. The connection was deliberately concealed." Michael absorbed this, appreciating the calculated precision of Richard's planning. "He's anticipated every move." "Not every move," Wilson countered. "We've relocated Lucy and Sarah to a police safe house. The location is known only to me and the officers directly involved, all of whom have been vetted." "And Jessica?" Michael asked. "At the courthouse with Victoria Bennett, preparing her statement. 2 of my most trusted officers are with them." Michael moved to the closet where James had hung fresh clothes. I need to join them. After you've spoken with the prosecution team, Wilson said firmly. Richard is still out there, Mr. Grant. District Attorney Phillips wants to discuss strategy. Strategy can wait, Michael argued. The hearing is still 4 hours away, Wilson interrupted. DA Phillips has information about Richard's offshore accounts that may help us track his movements. He's waiting in the conference room. Michael reluctantly acquiesced, knowing the prosecutor's insights could be valuable. As Wilson stepped out to arrange security for their meeting, Michael turned to James. I need you to deliver something to Jessica, he said quietly, removing a small envelope from his jacket. Privately, no one else can know about this. James accepted the envelope with a questioning look. Michael simply nodded, conveying the importance without words. Years of friendship had built a trust that required no explanation. Consider it done, James promised, tucking the envelope into his inner pocket. District Attorney Phillips proved to be a sharp-minded woman in her 50s, with keen eyes that missed nothing. She spread financial documents across the conference table, methodically outlining Richard's hidden assets. We've frozen the Cayman accounts, she explained, but there are others. Switzerland, Singapore, Dubai. Conservative estimate puts his hidden assets around $80 million. More than he took from Grant Enterprises, Michael noted. Exactly, Phillips agreed. Reynolds has been running similar schemes for years. Your company wasn't his first target, just his most ambitious. Wilson leaned forward. Where would he go with that kind of money? He could disappear anywhere. Phillips tapped a document. His passport shows frequent trips to Costa Rica over the past 3 years. Property records there show a beachfront compound purchased through a shell corporation. We've linked to him. Registered to a Ricardo Reynoso, not particularly creative with aliases. You think that's where he's headed? Michael stated. It's likely his contingency plan, Phillips confirmed. Costa Rican authorities are monitoring airports and marinas, but with private aviation and enough cash borders, become flexible. The implication hung heavily. Richard had resources, connections, and a head start. Even wounded, he remained dangerous, perhaps more so now with nothing to lose. What about the custody hearing? Michael asked. Phillips exchanged glances with Wilson. Judge Warner has reviewed the evidence. With Richard a fugitive and Robert Keller in custody, I don't anticipate challenges to Jessica's petition. Nevertheless, Jessica's testimony about the abuse remains crucial. Michael nodded his mind, racing ahead to what Jessica would face in court, recounting months of systematic abuse, all while processing fresh trauma from the lake house confrontation. There's something else, Phillips said, her tone shifting. The flash drive Richard gave you at the lake house, the one containing alleged videos of your late wife. Michael tensed. What about it? Our technical team analyzed the footage, Phillips said carefully. The videos are sophisticated fabrications. Facial mapping technology superimposed Catherine's features onto another woman's body. Audio manipulation created convincing dialogue. Relief flooded through Michael, though he kept his expression neutral. I never doubted Catherine. The technology is advanced, Phillips continued. Military grade. Not something a civilian could easily access. Michael's eyes narrowed. Meaning Reynolds had help beyond Keller, Wilson interjected. Someone with connections to government-level resources. We're pursuing that angle, Phillips assured him. But for now, our priority is apprehending Reynolds and ensuring your family's safety. As they concluded their meeting, Michael's phone vibrated with a text from Victoria. Jessica ready, court security in place. Hearing moved up to 1 p.m. Judge wants to avoid media circus. 1 hour earlier than planned. Michael felt both relief and apprehension at the accelerated timeline. Sooner meant less waiting, but also less time to prepare. He showed the message to Wilson, who immediately stood. I'll have a car brought around. We should move now. As they exited the conference room, Michael was struck by the hospital's increased security armed officers at entrances ID checks at every floor. The threat Richard posed had transformed a place of healing into a fortress. You've gone to extraordinary lengths, Michael observed. Wilson's expression remained professional but determined. Richard Reynolds has demonstrated he's willing to harm a child to achieve his goals. That makes this personal for every officer involved. In the elevator descending to the parking garage, Michael contemplated the day ahead. The custody hearing was just one battle in a larger war. Even with Richard a fugitive and Robert in custody, Grant Enterprises hung in the balance. His reputation built over decades was under attack, and somewhere out there, Richard plotted his next move. "You're thinking too hard," Wilson remarked as they reached the garage level. "One step at a time, Mr. Grant." "Michael," he corrected. "After everything we've been through, I think we're past formalities, Detective." "Karen, then," she replied with the ghost of a smile. The courthouse parking area was cordoned off police vehicles, forming a protective perimeter. Media vans clustered beyond the barriers, cameras trained on the entrance. Michael straightened his tie as Wilson pulled up to a side entrance where additional officers waited. "Ready?" she asked. "As I'll ever be," he replied, stepping out into the crisp autumn air. Victoria met them in a private conference room, her composure impressive despite the circumstances. "The judge has reviewed all evidence," she reported. "Sarah Peterson's documentation of Lucy's previous injuries proved particularly compelling. The guardian ad litem has already recommended full custody to Jessica." "And Jessica," Michael asked, "how is she holding up?" A shadow crossed Victoria's face. "Determined, scared, angry, all the emotions you'd expect, but she's stronger than even she realizes." "Where is she now?" "With Lucy in the private waiting room," Victoria replied. "Judge Warner made an exception to allow them time together before the hearing. Sarah's with them." Michael nodded gratefully. Sarah Peterson had transcended her role as Lucy's nurse, becoming a stabilizing presence for the traumatized child. Her consistent care and gentle manner had helped Lucy begin to trust adults again. As Michael turned toward the waiting room, Victoria touched his arm. "There's something you should know," she said quietly. "Jessica's prepared a victim impact statement. She wants to read it in open court." Michael hesitated. "Is that necessary, with everything we have?" "It's not about necessity," Victoria interrupted gently. "It's about reclaiming her voice. Richard silenced her for years. This is her choice, Michael." The insight struck him deeply. For too long, he had tried to protect Jessica by making decisions for her just as Richard had controlled her through different means. Both approaches denied her agency. "You're right," he acknowledged. "It's her choice." The waiting room door opened to reveal Jessica sitting on a small couch with Lucy reading a picture book. Both looked up as he entered Lucy's face, brightening instantly. "Grandpa!" she exclaimed, sliding from Jessica's lap to run to him. She stopped short at the sight of his arm in a sling, eyes widening. "You're hurt." Michael knelt carefully to her level. "Just a scratch," he assured her with a smile. "Much better today." Lucy studied him skeptically, then nodded, accepting his assessment. "Mommy's going to talk to the judge," she informed him seriously, "about the bad things." "I know," Michael replied, matching her solemnity. "Your mom is very brave." "Then we can go home," Lucy continued confidently, "to a new home where he can't find us." Michael glanced at Jessica, who stood watching the exchange, her expression a complex mixture of determination and vulnerability. She wore a simple navy dress, professional, but not cold, her blonde hair swept into a neat bun. The bruises on her face had faded to yellowish shadows, visible reminders of what she'd endured. "How are you?" he asked simply. Jessica took a deep breath. "Scared," she admitted, "but ready. James gave me your letter." Michael nodded, not asking if she'd read it. The envelope had contained his written testimony of his own failures as a father, acknowledging the years of emotional absence that had left her vulnerable to someone like Richard. Words he couldn't bring himself to say aloud, but needed her to know. "Whatever happens today," Jessica continued, "I want you to know I don't blame you anymore, not for any of it." The absolution he hadn't dared hope for left him momentarily speechless. Before he could respond, the door opened as Victoria returned. "It's time," she announced gently. The courtroom was smaller than Michael had expected, designed for family matters, rather than criminal proceedings. Judge Warner presided with quiet authority, her silver hair framing a face that had seen decades of human suffering without becoming hardened to it. The proceedings moved efficiently through preliminary matters, the guardian ad litem's recommendations, Detective Wilson's summary of the criminal investigation, Victoria's outline of the documented abuse pattern. Throughout, Lucy sat between Michael and Sarah in the gallery, quietly drawing on a pad, the adults shielding her from the worst details. When Jessica was called to testify, she walked to the witness stand with visible determination. Her voice trembled initially, but grew steadier as she recounted the systematic destruction of her sense of self under Richard's control. She described the isolation, the gaslighting, the financial manipulation, and finally, the escalating physical violence. When he started hurting Lucy, she said, her voice hardening, something inside me broke. I realized I could endure anything he did to me, but I would die before letting him harm my daughter again. Judge Warner listened attentively, occasionally asking clarifying questions with compassion rather than doubt. When Jessica finished, the judge thanked her sincerely. Mrs. Reynolds, Judge Warner said, "The courage you've demonstrated is extraordinary, not just today, but throughout your ordeal. This court acknowledges the immense difficulty in breaking free from an abusive relationship, particularly one involving such sophisticated control mechanisms." She reviewed her notes briefly before continuing. Based on the overwhelming evidence presented, this court grants sole legal and physical custody of Lucy Reynolds to her mother, Jessica Grant Reynolds, effective immediately. The child's surname may be changed to Grant at the mother's discretion. No visitation rights are granted to Richard Reynolds. Any future consideration of supervised contact would require complete psychological evaluation, successful rehabilitation, and demonstrated behavior change. Over a sustained period criteria, I frankly doubt Mr. Reynolds is capable of meeting. The judge's gavel fell with a sense of finality. Jessica's shoulders sagged with visible relief as Victoria embraced her briefly. Lucy looked up from her drawing. "Is it over?" she asked simply. "Can we go home now?" Home. The word carried weight beyond its simple syllable. Jessica knelt before her daughter, gently brushing a strand of hair from Lucy's face. "Yes, sweetheart, but we need a new home now, a fresh start." "You already have one," Michael said quietly. Both turned to look at him. "Catherine's lake house. I had the paperwork drawn up this morning. It's yours now, both of yours." Jessica's eyes widened. "Dad, I want you to have it," Michael insisted gently. "It should be lived in, filled with laughter again. It's what your mother would have wanted." The mention of Catherine brought emotion to Jessica's face. "What about you?" "Where will you live?" Michael smiled, the answer coming easily. "There's a guest house on the property, if you wouldn't mind your old dad nearby. Not too close, but close enough." Lucy slipped her hand into Michael's. "Will you teach me to fish, like in the pictures of Mommy at the lake?" Michael's heart swelled at the simple request, a normal childhood activity he'd rarely made time for with Jessica. "I'd like that very much," he promised. As they prepared to leave, Detective Wilson approached, her expression guarded. "Mr. Grant, there's a development. Richard Reynolds has been spotted boarding a private plane at a small airfield outside the city. We've notified federal authorities, but the plane took off before agents could arrive." Michael nodded, unsurprised. Richard had always planned multiple escape routes. "And Robert Keller, cooperating to a degree," Wilson replied. "He's provided access to some financial records in exchange for consideration during sentencing. His attorney is negotiating a plea deal." "Let him have it," Michael said, surprising both Wilson and Victoria. "Whatever it takes to get the full truth." Victoria raised an eyebrow. "That's unexpectedly magnanimous." Michael shook his head. "Not magnanimous, practical. Robert can rot in a minimum security prison or a maximum security one. Either way, he's paying for his crimes. But his testimony could help recover the stolen funds and rebuild Grant Enterprises' reputation." As they exited the courtroom, reporters surged forward, shouting questions. Michael instinctively moved to shield Jessica and Lucy, but Jessica gently stopped him. "It's okay," she said with newfound confidence. "We have nothing to hide anymore." She stepped forward to address the media, her voice steady as she spoke about surviving abuse and finding the courage to protect her child. Michael watched with pride as his daughter transformed her pain into purpose, already using her experience to reach others who might be suffering in silence. Lucy remained beside Michael, clutching his hand tightly as camera flashes burst around them. "Mommy is brave," she whispered. "Yes," Michael agreed, squeezing her small fingers reassuringly. "Just like you." Later that evening, after settling Jessica and Lucy into a secure hotel suite until the lake house could be properly prepared, Michael returned to his penthouse apartment for the first time since the night Lucy was hospitalized. The luxury space felt sterile and impersonal now, a showcase rather than a home. He poured himself a modest scotch and settled into his study, where James waited with updates from Grant Enterprises. The board is divided, James reported. Some want to clean house completely, others recognize that the company needs stability during the transition. Eleanor Whitmore is leading a faction advocating for your return once the investigation confirms your innocence. Michael sipped his drink contemplatively. And the stock? Down 18% since the news broke, but showing signs of stabilizing. The press conference helped your transparency resonated with investors. And the employees, James smiled slightly, loyal, more than you might expect. The rank and file never trusted Keller. Too slick, they said. Michael nodded, a weight settling in his chest as he contemplated the company he'd built from nothing. For 3 decades, Grant Enterprises had been his identity, his purpose, his legacy. Walking away would mean redefining himself completely at 54. You're thinking about stepping down permanently, James observed, reading his expression. Considering all options, Michael corrected. The company will survive with or without me. But will it thrive? James challenged. Grant Enterprises employs over 12,000 people, Michael. Their livelihoods depend on stable leadership. The responsibility Michael had always carried pressed heavily upon him. James was right. His decision affected thousands of families. Simply walking away might satisfy his personal desire for redemption, but could harm those who had faithfully served the company. What if there's a middle path? Michael mused. I could return temporarily to stabilize things, then implement a thoughtful succession plan. Train the next generation of leadership properly, not rush into retirement. James nodded approvingly. That sounds like the Michael Grant I know, responsible even in change. Their discussion was interrupted by Michael's phone ringing. Detective Wilson. We've tracked Reynolds' plane, she reported without preamble. It landed in Nicaragua, not Costa Rica, as expected. Local authorities are searching, but he likely crossed the border by land immediately. He's running his contingency plan, Michael concluded. Yes, but with complications. His wound appears to have become infected. Hospital sources in Managua report a foreign national matching his description, seeking emergency treatment before disappearing again. Michael absorbed this information, feeling no satisfaction at Richard's suffering. Keep me updated, he requested. And the protection detail for Jessica and Lucy remains in place, Wilson confirmed. I've authorized it for at least 30 days, possibly longer, depending on threat assessment. After ending the call, Michael sat in silence, contemplating the uncertain future. Richard was wounded, but free, a persistent threat that might never fully dissipate. The company hung in balance, and his new role as an active father and grandfather remained unfamiliar territory. His phone chimed with a text from Jessica. Lucy asking for you, nightmares again, can you come? Without hesitation, Michael replied, on my way. 20 minutes later, he entered the hotel suite to find Lucy curled in Jessica's lap, trembling slightly, her eyes red from crying. Hey, kiddo, Michael said gently, sitting beside them. Rough night. Lucy nodded solemnly. I saw him in my dreams. He was trying to take me away. Michael met Jessica's eyes over Lucy's head, reading the helplessness there, the parental pain of being unable to shield a child from their own memories. You know what helps me when I have scary dreams? Michael asked, keeping his voice light. Lucy looked up questioningly. I tell the scary thing that it can't hurt me anymore, right to its face. Want to try? Lucy considered this novel approach. How? Well, first we need to make the scary thing small, Michael explained, shifting to sit on the floor. Can you draw what you saw in your dream? Jessica provided paper and crayons from Lucy's backpack. With hesitant strokes, Lucy drew a crude but recognizable Richard, all sharp angles and exaggerated scowl. Perfect, Michael praised. Now what would you say to him if you knew he couldn't hurt you? Lucy stared at the drawing, then, in a small but firm voice said, You can't scare me anymore. My mommy and grandpa won't let you. That's right, Michael affirmed. And now if you want, you can tear it up. Show that the scary thing has no power. Lucy looked to Jessica for permission, then with unexpected vehemence ripped the paper into tiny pieces. A smile broke through her tears as she scattered the fragments. Gone, she declared with satisfaction. Not completely, Jessica cautioned gently. Sometimes the scary feelings come back, but each time they get a little smaller, a little less scary. The honesty of Jessica's response, acknowledging healing as a process rather than a single moment, struck Michael deeply. His daughter had developed wisdom he was only beginning to grasp. Later, after Lucy had finally fallen asleep, Jessica joined Michael on the suite's balcony. The Boston skyline glittered before them, Grant Tower prominent among the illuminated buildings. "Thank you for coming," Jessica said, wrapping herself in a blanket against the autumn chill. "I'll always come," Michael promised. "Any time, day or night." Jessica studied him. "You really mean that, don't you?" "It's not just words this time." "Not just words," Michael confirmed. "I've missed so much of your life, Jessica. Too many moments I can never get back. But I can be here now for whatever comes next." Jessica leaned against the railing. "I'm thinking about starting a foundation," she said after a moment, "for families affected by domestic violence, particularly those trapped by financial abuse and control." Pride swelled in Michael's chest. "That's a wonderful idea. I'd need help," she continued, "someone with business experience, connections." "I might know someone," Michael replied with a smile. "Recently considering a career change, looking for meaningful work." Jessica smiled, Catherine's smile lighting her face. "Think he'd be interested?" "I believe he would be honored," Michael said sincerely, "though he'd insist on being the junior partner. The foundation should be your vision, Jessica, your leadership." She straightened a new confidence in her posture. "I've been reading about trauma recovery for Lucy and for myself. Did you know trauma literally rewires the brain? But new experiences can create new pathways. We can heal Dad, not back to who we were, but forward to something different." The insight resonated deeply. "Forward," Michael echoed. "I like that." They sat in companionable silence until Jessica asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. "Those videos Richard mentioned, of Mom, fabricated," Michael said firmly. "Digital manipulation. Catherine's face superimposed on someone else's body. Technically sophisticated, but fake." Jessica's relief was palpable. "I never really believed it. Mom loved you completely." "And I loved her," Michael said softly. "Though not always as well as I should have. I was absent too often, Jessica. That part is true, regardless of the videos." "She understood you better than you think," Jessica replied. "She used to tell me, your father shows love through provision and protection. It's the language he knows. She never doubted you loved her dad. She just wished you could show it differently sometimes." The insight into Catherine's perspective, one he'd never heard before, moved Michael deeply. "I wish I'd known that then," he said finally. "Me too," Jessica agreed. "But we can't change the past. We can only learn from it." As she returned inside to check on Lucy, Michael remained on the balcony, contemplating the city lights. His phone vibrated with an email notification, Eleanor Whitmore, requesting a meeting to discuss his potential return to Grant Enterprises. The board was already reconsidering their position. Michael closed the notification without responding. That decision could wait until morning. Tonight belonged to the two people sleeping inside the family he'd nearly lost through neglect, and might have lost permanently through Richard's machinations. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of activity. The lake house required security upgrades before Jessica and Lucy could safely move in. Grant Enterprises demanded attention as the financial investigation progressed. And Richard remained at large, though intelligence suggested he'd fled deeper into Central America, his infection requiring ongoing medical attention. Through it all, Michael prioritized family with a dedication that surprised even himself. Each morning began with breakfast with Jessica and Lucy, regardless of what business matters waited. Each evening ended with a phone call if he couldn't be physically present, small rituals establishing a new pattern of reliability. When they finally moved into the renovated lake house, Michael took a personal day, his first in decades, to help them settle in. Lucy explored the property with wonder, particularly delighted by the small dock where Michael promised fishing lessons would begin that weekend. As dusk fell, Michael found Jessica in Catherine's old study, now transformed into an office for the foundation she was creating. Architectural plans for a dedicated building in Boston lay spread across the desk. "The board approved my temporary return," Michael announced from the doorway. 6 months to stabilize operations, implement new financial controls, and train my successor." Jessica looked up surprised. "You're really stepping down," Michael nodded. "Not immediately, but yes. The company needs new leadership, someone who'll build on what's good while correcting what isn't." "And what will Michael Grant do after 30 years at the helm?" Jessica asked curiously. "Consult for a promising new foundation," he replied with a smile. "Teach his granddaughter to fish. Maybe learn to relax occasionally." "Relax?" Jessica feigned shock. "I'm not sure that word is in your vocabulary. I'm a quick study. Michael assured her. Speaking of learning new skills, Lucy mentioned wanting piano lessons. The old upright in the living room still works. I had it tuned last week. Jessica's expression softened. Mom's piano. I remember her playing while I danced around the room. You were quite the performer. Michael recalled the memory surprisingly vivid. Catherine would play Dance of the Sugar Plum Fairy over and over because it was your favorite. I'd forgotten that, Jessica said quietly. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken by Lucy calling from the porch that she'd discovered a family of ducks by the shoreline. As they moved to join her, Michael's phone vibrated with a news alert. Grant Enterprises stock surges following announcement of Michael Grant's temporary return. He silenced the phone without reading further. The company would endure regardless of the day's market fluctuations. What mattered was the excited 6-year-old on the porch pointing out waterfowl with the uncomplicated joy of a child beginning to feel safe again. 3 months later, as winter draped the lake in crystalline white, Michael stood on the frozen shoreline, watching Lucy carefully place her small feet on ice skates for the first time. Jessica steadied her daughter, while Sarah Peterson, now a regular weekend visitor, stood ready with hot chocolate and encouragement. Remember tiny steps at first, Jessica instructed patiently. Just like learning anything new, Lucy's face reflected intense concentration as she wobbled forward, determination overcoming fear. When she managed 3 consecutive steps without falling, her triumph illuminated the winter afternoon. "Grandpa, I'm doing it," she called. "I see you," Michael replied, his chest tight with emotion. "You're doing great." His phone rang James Wilson with updates on Richard's situation. Michael answered while keeping his eyes on Lucy's progress. The Costa Rican authorities found his compound, James reported, abandoned but with evidence he'd been there recently. The infection apparently required significant medical intervention. And now, intelligence suggests he's in Colombia. Less sophisticated healthcare, but more places to disappear. Michael absorbed this information calmly. Richard's shadow had diminished with time and distance, though the family maintained security protocols out of prudence rather than fear. The extradition paperwork is proceeding, James continued. If he surfaces for more medical treatment, there's a good chance he'll be apprehended. Thank you for the update, Michael said, watching Lucy execute a careful turn with Jessica's guidance. As he ended the call, Sarah approached with a steaming mug. Hot chocolate, she offered. Lucy insists it's essential for proper skating. Michael accepted, gratefully, wise beyond her years. She's doing remarkably well, Sarah observed, following his gaze to where Lucy now attempted to skate backward. The night terrors have decreased significantly. Thanks largely to you, Michael acknowledged. Sarah's transition from nurse to friend had evolved naturally, her genuine concern for Lucy, creating bonds that transcended professional boundaries. Your weekend visits mean the world to her, Sarah smiled. They mean the world to me too. My apartment feels empty after spending time here. Michael studied her thoughtfully. Sarah had revealed little about her own life, though he'd gathered she had few family connections. You know, the East Wing renovation will be finished next month. Guest suite private entrance. If you wanted a more permanent arrangement, weekends only, or... Are you offering me a job, Michael? Sarah asked, amusement in her eyes. No, he replied honestly. I'm offering you family. Different thing entirely. Before Sarah could respond, Jessica skated over, flushed with cold and laughter. Lucy wants to show you her special move, she informed Michael. Fair warning, it involves deliberate falling and making snow angels on the ice. Sounds impressive, Michael said seriously. I wouldn't miss it. As he moved to join Lucy on the ice, carefully navigating in his own skates, Jessica called after him. The foundation board approved the first shelter location. Construction begins in spring. Michael gave her a thumbs-up, pride surging through him. In just 3 months, Jessica had transformed her traumatic experience into a mission that would help countless others. The Jessica Grant Foundation for Family Safety had already secured partnerships with 3 hospitals and substantial funding from corporations eager to associate with a cause championed by the Grant family. Lucy's special move proved to be exactly as advertised, a controlled fall, followed by energetic arm waving to create a pattern in the ice's light dusting of snow. Michael applauded enthusiastically, then demonstrated his own special move, a dignified glide that ended in a considerably less dignified tumble when he caught an edge. Lucy's delighted laughter was worth every bruise. As Jessica helped him up, teasing him about his graceful recovery, Michael glimpsed the family they were becoming, not perfect, still healing, but solid in ways that mattered. That evening, as snow began falling in earnest, they gathered in the lake house living room. Lucy practiced simple scales on Catherine's piano under Sarah's guidance, while Jessica reviewed foundation documents beside a crackling fire. Michael's phone chimed with a message from Detective Wilson. Reynolds spotted in Cartagena Hospital. Colombian authorities notified. Will update when we have confirmation. He acknowledged the message calmly, no longer feeling the visceral rage Richard's name once triggered. The man had lost everything, his freedom, his reputation, his ill-gotten wealth. Even if he temporarily evaded justice, he would spend his life as a fugitive, looking over his shoulder, trusting no one. A prison of his own making. Lucy abandoned the piano to climb onto Michael's lap with a storybook. Will you read to me, Grandpa, with the funny voices? Absolutely, Michael agreed, setting aside his phone. Richard could wait. This moment, this child could not. As he read, giving each character a distinct voice that made Lucy giggle, Michael caught Jessica watching them, her expression soft, with something that might have been wonder. She met his eyes briefly and smiled Catherine's smile before returning to her work. Later, after Lucy had been tucked into bed and Jessica had retired to finalize presentation materials, Michael stood on the dock, despite the cold, watching snowflakes disappear into the dark water where the lake remained unfrozen. Sarah joined him, wrapped in a heavy coat. Penny for your thoughts, Michael considered the question. I was thinking about legacy, he admitted. For decades, I thought Grant Enterprises was my legacy. The buildings with my name, the corporate achievements, the wealth created. And now, Sarah prompted when he fell silent. Michael gestured toward the illuminated windows of the house, where his daughter and granddaughter slept safely. Now I understand that legacy isn't what you build. It's who you build, the lives you touch, the values you instill. Sarah nodded understanding. Lucy asked me something interesting today. She wanted to know if people can change, really change, or if bad people stay bad forever. What did you tell her? That people can change, but only if they want to. And that change isn't a single decision. It's thousands of small choices every day. Michael absorbed this wisdom. Thousands of small choices, he repeated. I like that. The snow fell more heavily now, dusting their shoulders and hair with delicate crystals. In the distance, the lights of a boat moved slowly across the darkness, life continuing its course despite the winter chill. We should go in, Sarah suggested. It's getting colder. Michael nodded, taking a last look at the peaceful scene. As they turned toward the warmth of the house, his phone vibrated with an incoming call, Detective Wilson again. Michael hesitated, then silenced the ringer. Whatever news she brought Richard's capture or continued freedom could wait until morning. Tonight belonged to the present, not the past. To the family gathered under this roof. To the legacy being built not in steel and glass, but in trust restored and promises kept. As they reached the porch, Michael paused, looking back at the silent lake and swirling snow. The world had never seemed more beautiful, more full of possibility than in this moment of simple peace. Sarah touched his arm questioningly. Michael smiled, snow melting on his eyelashes. Just grateful, he explained simply, for second chances. We all are, Sarah replied softly. Some things are worth losing everything for. Michael nodded, thinking of the daughter who had found her voice, the granddaughter learning to trust again, and his own journey from obsessive businessman to something more essential. The final protector. Not a role he'd chosen, but one that had chosen him. The most important work he would ever do. As he closed the door against the winter night, Michael Grant felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Not success or achievement or pride in acquisition, but the quiet contentment of a man who had finally discovered what truly mattered. Not what he had built, but who he had become.